In today's video, I want to dig into something I see all of the time. That is the standard retirement saving rules that you hear from when you read articles like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity. As well intentioned as they are, following these guidelines blindly could actually cause you to oversave. Now, again, hey, I'm a huge fan of oversaving. I want to run my models really conservatively. That's a good spot to be in. But what we're going to do in today's video is causing you to oversave may lead you to working way longer than you need to and end up missing some of the best years of your retirement. Now, over the years of helping people retired, and as I say, stay retired, I've seen firsthand where these so-called safe savings targets can quietly undermine the real goal, which is for you to live a full and meaningful retirement while you're still healthy enough to enjoy it. That's exactly why we're making this video today, is to show you why these popular savings rules, how they often fall short and why they may be holding you back. And what a smarter, more balanced and personalized approach looks like for you. Because remember, personal finance is more personal than it is financial. We have to build a plan that works for you and nobody else. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So let's start with some of the big recommendations out there and unpack them. Fidelity recommends that you have anywhere between 8 to 10 times your household income saved inside your portfolio by the time you're ready to retire. Now, Vanguard, not very helpful. They take a different approach. Rather than telling you how much with a savings rate you need to be saving, they just show you data on their average investors by age and by income level and how much they have saved up. But in my opinion, this doesn't tell me anything at all about how much you should save, how far away you are towards reaching your number of retirement. Averages, they don't mean much. Some of these targets are way too conservative, especially if you're married and have two incomes coming in your household. Those are two savers. You're working twice as fast. Or what if you have a pension? Or if you've delayed Social Security, your house is already paid for, or you're planning on working part-time in retirement. Do you see where I'm going here? Is that all these things could move the needle in your favor. Again, I'll make a huge disclaimer here. Don't get me wrong. I always want you to oversave rather than undersave. And being conservative is really smart. But the point I'm trying to make in this video here is that depending on your specific situation, you may already be a lot closer than you already think to retirement. And reading articles like this, you may feel really discouraged if you're benchmarking against the wrong number. Now, before we get into how to create a retirement plan that actually works for you, not just some benchmark you pull off the internet, what I want you to do is click on the link in the description below, and I'm going to send you a personalized Loom video where I'll review your specific situation and give you actionable retirement advice tailored to you and your plan. No generic averages, just real advice for you in your real life. Now, if you're in your late 50s or even early 60s watching this video, I want you to pay really close attention here. Because as I've mentioned before, saving too much for retirement and working just one more year, now it might sound like a reasonable thing to do on paper, but it could end up costing you one thing that money cannot buy back. That's your time, your quality of life. It's two things, but you get what I'm saying. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what experiences and opportunities am I sacrificing by working that extra year? And what memories are you missing by not going on those family trips, those family events, or even just those everyday moments because you're stuck chasing an arbitrary savings number? What can you actually say yes to right now, right? Is it go on the stinking trip, be adventurous, fly first class, whatever it is? The reality comes down to, and you've heard me say it before, you get one shot. It's one life, one retirement. It's not just about one more year. Here's the really important thing. It's one more year you're giving up of the year of health, or your energies, where memories you could otherwise have been making, because money is utility and time is a declining asset. And continuing to build more and more wealth doesn't necessarily buy you more experiences. Because as we age, our health naturally limits and constricts what we're actually able to do. No matter how much money we make or we have in the bank, that's why these early years of your retirement, Your late 50s and 60s are often the most valuable years you will ever have. Now that you've seen why blindly following standard retirement guidelines could cause you to oversave and work longer than you actually really need to, I want to shift gears and start talking about something that I think is a lot more important, which is how to make your retirement your own and to create a plan that actually aligns with you and your life goals. Because remember, at its core, retirement is really just a basic math equation. It's fixed income, sources like Social Security, a pension, rental income, part-time work, whatever it is, you have your income, minus your living expenses and your liabilities like your mortgage or car payments. And when you take those two numbers, whatever amount you're short, meaning your income doesn't quite cover it, you're going to need to rely on your portfolio to generate that income for you to live off of. Now, that sounds pretty simple, right? Now, here's the thing. Everyone, even these big names like Vanguard and Fidelity, they have their own generic sets of rules to follow when it comes to retirement savings. You need to have this number times your savings saved up, or this number times your income, or you could spend this much. But I don't know about you. If you give me too many different methods, I get overwhelmed and confused, and I don't know which one of these to actually use. And actually, more importantly, none of these models are specific to you. Nowhere in this does it pinpoint for you how much you personally can have saved, when you should actually begin to take Social Security, what hidden costs like taxes or inflation or healthcare, maybe even long-term care that you in your specific situation should be planning for, how much you could safely withdraw, and how that number changes when markets do really, really well or they do bad. And finally, how your investment should change over time when you're retired versus while you're still earning and working and accumulating. Because let's be honest, accumulating money while you're working is a totally different game than once you're retired and you're drawing money from your portfolio. The stakes are a lot higher. The margin for error is a lot smaller. So in this next section, I want to walk through each of these topics I just briefly touched on and show you exactly how it is that you can arrive at your number and build a plan that fits for you and your life, not just cookie cutter model advice. If you're watching this video and you're not yet retired, I want you to do something and spend the next few months taking what I like to call a test drive or a dress rehearsal for retirement and diligently track and monitor your expenses, all your spending. Because the point of this exercise is to understand and get a baseline of your monthly expenses. This is a starting point. Because from there, we're going to need to factor in and add things like your taxes. Remember, you're no longer working, so you're not going to have a paycheck. Now, some taxes may be taken from Social Security, but things that we're money that we're taking from like an IRA, we need to factor in taxes and take a bigger gross distribution. We'll also have to factor in things like, if we're retiring early, ACA or open care marketplace premiums, because our Medicare premiums will be deducted from our Social Security. But what about long-term care premiums as well, or property taxes if your house is paid off or not? And travel or gifts to kids that you want to maximize. You see where I'm going at with all these things. The better we know our expenses, the closer we are to arriving at our magic number. Remember, and it sounds really cheesy, but specific is terrific. Because once we get our baseline, then we can begin to work backwards to figure out how much we actually need to have saved. Now, when to take Social Security is one of the biggest and most permanent financial decisions you'll ever make. And let me first start by saying, I don't know you and your situation, and so I really encourage you to do your homework before making that permanent decision. And listen, if you have questions or you need help, go ahead and click on the link in the description and we'll schedule some time to review your strategy together. It's that important, especially if you're married, which I'll get to in just a moment here. Now, you can start collecting Social Security as early as 62, but if you do, your monthly benefits will be permanently reduced by about 8% a year for every year you choose to claim before your full retirement age. That could add up to over maybe 30%, which today the full retirement age is around 66, 67, depending on when you were born. And if you wait beyond that full retirement age, all the way up to age 70, your benefit grows by about 8% a year. That's 68, 69, 70. So that's a 32% raise. And now getting an 8% raise every year, something that, especially in today's market, is not easy to find. Now, it's important to know it also, as I mentioned earlier, it works the opposite way, in that taking it early, you permanently reduce your Social Security benefits also by that 8% number. It's not just about chasing the biggest monthly check. There's some strategy that goes into it. There's other smart reasons you may want to consider either claiming early or, in this case, postponing. Mentioned earlier in another video, we have the golden window and Roth conversions, right? Where we intentionally create a gap in income so that we can have a lower reported income to give us the chance to move money from our IRAs and into a Roth and do so at a lower tax rate before our required minimum distribution kicks in. And if you're married, the timing with Social Security gets really, really important here. Now, there's two things specifically for married couples and Social Security that I want to point out. The first one, spousal benefit. When we have a married couple, that first spouse has the ability to select either the higher of their own income, that's 100% of their benefit, or 50% of their partner's benefit. See where I'm going at here? If that partner decides to delay their benefit to at least 67, maybe it's 68, 69, 70, somewhere in there, their spouse, if they wait as well, can get 50% of their full retirement benefit. That's the amount that starts at age 66, 67. And so when we review Social Security statements, what we first want to figure out when we list out a strategy, and we'll take into consideration Roth conversions and your golden window and that type of thing. But when we're looking at maximizing benefits, we want to be able to look at, is there income in your portfolio that we can draw out where we can delay intentionally Social Security? If we can just get to age 67, it's going to create more lifetime income for the both of you because your spouse now has the ability to claim either the higher of their own, up to 100%, or 50% of yours without impacting or jeopardizing your benefit. Number two is survivor benefits. Now, a little different than spousal benefits. This requires a little bit of a different strategy here where we're looking at maximizing your lifetime benefits for your spouse. So if there's a gap in age between you and your spouse, or even if you guys are relatively the same age, what we're looking at with claiming strategies here is having at least one. It's preferably, and it makes more sense to have the higher earner that has the higher Social Security benefit wait until age 70, because what this allows you to do then is if that person who waits till 70 is also the person that more than likely would pass away first, your spouse gets to collect that full benefit. They don't get to just keep theirs. They get the choice to replace. And now if you're waiting till 70, you've created a lot more income for your loved one in the event of you passing away first. So when it comes to Social Security, especially when you're married, there's a lot of things at play. So delaying Social Security is not always the right move for everyone, but it really just depends on your health, your income needs, your goals, the size of your financial plan, what we're trying to achieve from the tax standpoint. But when done thoughtfully, it can be one of the most powerful strategies and help you build a secure and flexible retirement. When it comes to taxes, we need to be able to create a plan in understanding where we take our first dollar from. This is why it's so important to work with a financial planner, because where we take our first dollar from, it's going to be taxed differently. If we take our money from a retirement account such as an IRA, a 401k, 403b, it's all pre-tax unless otherwise specified like a Roth, and all of that money coming out is ordinary income. And what do we know about ordinary income? It's taxed just like your paycheck. And what that means is that could put us in a whole new tax bracket. That could spike up the costs of our Medicare or our insurance premiums if we're not yet 65. So all these things are connected. Whereas if we take our money specifically from a brokerage account, we're only paying capital gains. Or if we have money in a checking, a CD, a high yield savings account, we're not paying taxes on those distributions. So where we take our money out from matters. Remember, when it comes to retirement, it's not what you earn, but it's what you keep after taxes. So we need to figure out first where we're going to take that money from. Now, specifically with healthcare, if we're retiring before 65, we're going to need to find insurance if our employer isn't covering us, we're not grandfathered, or our spouse isn't still working, or we're not working a part-time job where we get health insurance coverage. We're going to need to go to the open care marketplace. And with this, it's actually not based on your net worth. It's based on your income for that particular year. And so what's really nice about this is if we find a way to take our distribution strategically from a checking account, a savings account, a high yield savings account, or a brokerage account. Notice which one I'm not listing, a 401k or the IRA, because that's all ordinary income. So if we have a way to keep our income lower, what this allows us to do is potentially qualify for healthcare premiums, or otherwise known as subsidies. And now if we're 65 or older, what we want to keep in mind is IRMA, which I mentioned earlier, and being able to understand that if we have a higher income, if we're taking money out from our retirement account, like our 401k or a 403b, that money's taxed. And if we get above a certain rate, as you'll see on these charts here, that's going to make our Medicare premiums get a little more expensive, which means if we're already pulling Social Security, we're going to have our Social Security paychecks be a little smaller. Now, we could talk about Roth conversions at a later time. If there's years where our income spikes from a Roth conversion, the sale of a house or a business, keep in mind your IRMA, it's adjusted every year. It's based off of your income from 2 years prior. And so it's not going to stay that way forever, but it is really helpful to keep in mind when we're figuring out our budget and our expenses, where we take our money from matters. Now, when it comes to retirement spending, we first want to figure out what our withdrawal rate is going to be. Remember, we said earlier, our total expenses, retirement's just basically a one big math equation, and we have our living expenses minus our income sources, and whatever amount we're short, we need to pull from our portfolio. That's what's known as your withdrawal rate. The amount of money we need to pull, including taxes, because remember, if we're pulling money from an IRA or 401k, we have to take into consider taxes, as that distribution is taxed as ordinary income. So we have that number that we need to pull from our portfolio, and we divide it by our total portfolio number. When we get that percentage, we want to try and keep that number somewhere below 6%. And again, we have to have this strong caveat that I think it's worth mentioning, is that retirement plans, they don't fail. They just simply adjust. So if we run into trouble, this is why it's so important to have a financial planner, to not just follow blindly advice on the internet or cookie cutter and generic advice that says we can spend this exact same amount. Because what we have to adjust for is what happens if markets don't do well and now we're pulling the same amount of money from a smaller bucket of money. Well, our withdrawal rate just went up. So it's really important to know your number at the start of every year, or as markets change, if they're doing poorly, what your new withdrawal rate is. You want to pay really close attention to that. Now, on the other side, when markets do really well, as we've experienced really since 2008, 2009, we can also afford to spend more, because part of this whole entire video is saying, how do we maximize our utility function of money? How do we get the most out of this? And really the point of this video is we want to do the majority of our spending, or more of our spending rather, in our earlier years to maximize our happiness, our fulfillment, our purpose, with the caveat that as we get into our late 70s, early 80s, and beyond, our spending begins to look a little different. It begins to adjust to the downwards. That's what financial advisor and researcher Michael Kitces refers to as the go-go, slow-go, no-go years. And so I really like this methodology because it allows us for flexibility. It also says that as we have what's called these guardrails, which means here's our upper limit of what we could spend and our lower limit based off of how markets perform, it comes with the flexibility that as things change, we can continue to update and run these numbers, because we know retirement plans, they don't fail. They just simply adapt and adjust. The last one we're going to get into is what your portfolio looks like once you're in retirement, because we have to keep in mind your portfolio is going to shift. It's one of the easier things to do when you're still working, when you're earning money, when you're accumulating and you're putting money in through your 401k to build your retirement. A lot of people use target retirement funds, or they have the help of a financial advisor, but the game dramatically shifts when you hit the stop button and now you begin pulling money out. We need to begin to carve in some cash and short-term bonds, because one of the biggest things we don't want to do in making a mistake is pulling money from our stocks. Those are our long-term appreciating assets when markets are down, because we rob them of the future ability to recover. See, in order to get that long-term average that so many financial advisors and economists talk about, of that 8 to 12% return, depending on how you measure it, that assumes we leave it alone and we don't disrupt it. So we don't want to be able to have to be forced to pull our stocks during a market downturn to meet our living expenses. So when we construct, and I'll put out an entire video on this, but in summary, as we build our retirement portfolio, we want to make sure we have enough money for somewhere between 5 to 10 years of living expenses. I like to call this personally our war chest, because in that war chest, regardless of what happens in markets, in politics, in policy, in taxes, whatever it is, we know when markets go erratic, as they do from time to time, if we have money preserved, safeguarded, put on the shelf inside our war chest, we could confidently spend from that and leave our stocks alone and give them time to improve and recover. And the other thing, what we know about that, is what this allows to do is, with markets being efficient and having good years, about 8 every 10 years, statistically speaking, during those good years, we could replenish our war chest from the growth. Think of it as a downward cascading waterfall. So it's really important that we have that separation, that distinction between long-term assets and short-term assets. Because when we're in retirement, we want to make sure that we have a portfolio that, number one, is resilient, and most importantly, we can rely and count on it every single month to give us that paycheck as if we never left our job. So we need to structure it in such a way where we're not taking on those big swings and shocks when the markets are down. We have enough safeguarded to be able to meet whatever amount we're short from our living expenses. Now, if you're still with me here and we're figuring out, now that we know our living expenses, our distributions, we're solving for taxes, this is how we arrive at our magic number. When we have our living expenses, what we know we're going to need each and every month, each and every year, let's go ahead and annualize that number. Let's say it's $50,000. So that's more or less $4,000 a month. Let's go ahead now and divide it by that withdrawal rate. Let's say it's 4%. All of a sudden, now you have your number. It's $1.25 million. The sooner we get to that number, and we've watched this video and we now know what that is, it gives us that peace of mind to say, if we've already hit that number, then what are we waiting for? Because this is your retirement. And now that you understand why following the standard retirement saving guidelines put out by those big shops like Vanguard and Fidelity, they could cause you to unnecessarily work longer than you really need to, sacrificing your best years of your retirement. And so now that you see that, if you'd like a personalized analysis of where you truly stand on the path to retirement, what I want you to do is click on the link in the description below. You'll book a call with us, and we want to help you develop a balanced approach that ensures both your present and your future needs are met without unnecessarily sacrificing. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.